Some people are born to be on stage. And then there are others like Zara, who have to claw for every inch of sidewalk just to earn the right to dance. No one noticed her that afternoon. They saw a young black girl in a threadbare hoodie dancing alone in the middle of a grand plaza, and they kept walking. But if anyone had stopped, had really looked, they would have seen that amid the honking horns, hurried heels, and cold city light, something miraculous was happening. No soundtrack, no spotlight, no applause, only her body moving with a grace and pain so raw it felt like life itself was spilling its truth with every step she took. Zara Johnson, 16 years old, had no stage, no loyal fans, no roof over her head. All she had was the dance, the one thing the world hadn't stolen from her. Yet, every spin, every crouch, every leap told the story of dreams denied, of a little girl who once believed in justice and was now learning to create her own version of it. Each move was a petition sent to the world. She wasn't asking for pity. She wasn't trying to be noticed. She was proving something. Talent doesn't need permission to exist. 3 years ago, Zara still dreamed. She dreamed of getting into the Prestige Academy of Arts, a place where the stage lights waited for feet that could fly. But then reality hit. A glamorous building with locked gates, where every ticket in was decided not by skill, but by skin color, last name, and zip code. She had stood there, application in hand, staring through the glass at a world that was never meant for her. And now, 3 years later, she stood again, only this time on the outside looking in. What Zara didn't know was that from the top floor of that same building, a pair of eyes was watching her every movement, as if tracking a blemish on an otherwise flawless facade. Victoria Whitmore embodied the old school view of art, where refinement was measured in stock value, where classical pieces never missed a note, and where skin tone had to be just right to not clash with the scenery. To her, art was never about freedom. It was a tool to maintain order. And today, the presence of Zara, a nameless girl with no bank account and way too much spirit, was a bigger threat than any bad review. Security, remove that girl now, Victoria said without even a second glance. Below, 3 uniformed men emerged. They didn't ask questions, they didn't hesitate. To them, she was a foreign object that didn't belong in this polished space. One of them kicked over the hat Zara had placed in front of her, sending coins skittering across the concrete. Coins that passers-by had dropped not out of pity, but because they had been struck by something in her dance. Zara looked up. She didn't cry, didn't scream, didn't beg. She quietly picked up every coin, then stood tall and looked each man square in the eye. "You're going to remember me," she said, her voice small but pounding like a drum to the chest. "All day, you'll wish you had treated me like a human being." At that very moment, a sleek black car pulled up across the street. Inside sat Marcus, a 12-year-old boy who had been paralyzed since birth. He had stopped believing in miracles the day his mom died. He'd refused physical therapy, refused to talk to anyone, refused to live, really. But right now, watching Zara, he whispered, "Dad, stop the car." James Patterson, his father and one of the wealthiest and most feared businessmen in the city, obeyed without hesitation. He'd funded dozens of redevelopment projects, attended hundreds of expensive shows, but never had he seen a scene that struck his heart still like this one. This girl, in ripped clothes, with fire in her eyes, and a dance that demanded the world remember she existed, was the kind of art money could never buy. "Dad, why are they treating her like that?" Marcus asked, his tiny hands pressed against the window, eyes brimming not from illness but from seeing injustice clearly for the first time in his life. James didn't answer. He couldn't. And then Zara, just as she turned to leave, locked eyes with Marcus. For the briefest second, something passed between them. Not pity, recognition of each other's loneliness, recognition that they'd both been left behind, and recognition that maybe they'd change each other forever. Upstairs, Victoria Whitmore allowed herself a faint smile, thinking the nuisance had been dealt with. She had no idea that in turning her back, She had just lit the fuse to an underground firestorm. Because sometimes the greatest revolutions begin with a dance the world tries to forget. Zara walked away, silent as a shadow sliding beneath the city's glow, never looking back. But inside her nothing was quiet. No one knew that tucked inside the pocket of that ragged hoodie she carried something far beyond what anyone expected from a homeless girl. A battered smartphone, filled with data and plans that hadn't been set in motion yet. Her finger hovered over the screen. One more tap, and everything could begin. But she paused. "Not yet," she whispered, like a conductor in front of a symphony waiting for the perfect moment to strike the first note. 3 days later, in a high-rise office overlooking the heart of the city, James Patterson still couldn't stop thinking about her. This was a man who'd once bought a dozen buildings in under an hour, and now he sat frozen for hours, unable to make a single decision beyond this one. He had to find that girl again. Marcus, his son, didn't hesitate. Every day since that moment in the plaza, he'd ask, "Dad, we're not going to let her disappear, right?" And that question, so simple, so steady, softened James's heart, bit by bit. A heart that had felt frozen since his wife died. "This is crazy, sir," said Harrison, James's longtime assistant, clearly frustrated. "You don't know anything about that girl." But James answered only with a look. Calm, unwavering. He wasn't chasing another investment. He was searching for a way out, for Marcus, for himself, and maybe for her too. 2 hours later, they found Zara. Still dancing? Same movements, different plaza, less light, more wind. But to Marcus, the second he saw her, everything lit up again. "There she is!" he shouted, like he'd just found something he thought was lost forever. James stepped out and gently lifted Marcus from his wheelchair. He walked toward Zara with a quiet confidence, the kind of confidence that belonged to a man who'd spent his life creating opportunities. "My son hasn't stopped talking about you," he said. Zara froze. She'd learned to be wary of powerful people. They were often the first to crush the dreams of the powerless. But then she looked into Marcus's eyes, clear, honest, untouched by suspicion. And for the first time in a long while, she felt something rare, safe. "Your dad seems like a good man," she told Marcus, then smirked with a bitter edge. "Not like the suit and tie types in that fancy building." Marcus nodded. "They hurt you," he said, his voice strangely deep and certain. "My dad was really mad." Then James offered something unexpected. "Would you like to have dinner at our home? Marcus would love to see you dance again, in our garden." It sounded like a line from a fairy tale, but was spoken with the gravity of a man who had seen too much pain to ever speak lightly. Zara said yes, not because it was a millionaire's dinner invitation, but because for the first time in years someone had invited her not out of curiosity, but out of care. That dinner became the first time Marcus laughed out loud since his mother died, and it was the first time Zara danced without needing to prove anything. She didn't dance to survive, she danced to connect. Every move she made, Marcus mirrored from his wheelchair with his fragile arms, and for the first time, those movements weren't a divide between two worlds. They were a bridge connecting them. After dinner, James invited Zara into his study. To the warm light, he asked, "Who taught you to dance like that?" Zara hesitated, then whispered, "My mom." A shadow passed over her eyes. "She must have been incredible. Got a scholarship to the very academy that just kicked me out." Zara paused, took a deep breath. But when they found out she was pregnant, they took it away. She was a young black woman with no connections. They didn't think she deserved to come back. James felt a weight tighten in his chest. "Who?" he asked, though the answer was already forming in his mind. Zara looked him dead in the eye. "Victoria Whitmore. She destroyed my mother's dream before I was even born." The silence stretched. "My mom died when I was 13, and even at the end, she still believed it was her fault." Now James understood. The calm in Zara's gaze wasn't detachment, it was preparation. Zara wasn't just some girl living on the streets. She was executing a plan, and this meeting wasn't chance. At that very moment in her office at the Cultural Center, Victoria was preparing to confront the ghost she'd created. New security systems had been installed. Facial recognition software was programmed to alert immediately if Zara Johnson appears. She told her assistant. This can't happen again. The center's reputation matters more than any one girl. What she didn't know was that those same systems were recording her. Every command, every audio log, and the person watching it all unfold. But Zara, 3 years on the streets, hadn't just kept her alive. They had taught her to move like a shadow, taught her how to connect with people no one else even saw. One day while visiting the Patterson house, Marcus asked, "How are you so smart? Your name's like that warrior prince my uncle told me about." Zara smiled. "Every warrior," she said, "has a strategy." Then she pulled a thick file from her bag. James opened it and rose. Inside were letters, photographs, audio recordings, financial documents, an exposé of Victoria Whitmore's shady dealings over the past 2 years. "How did you get this?" he asked. Zara answered quietly. "People who no one notices hear a lot, and I've got some friends who are really good with computers." Meanwhile, through those backyard dance sessions with Zara, Marcus began making a recovery that stunned his doctors. They couldn't explain it, but James could. Zara wasn't just a dancer, she was a remedy that medicine science hadn't defined yet. She made a heart that had stopped wanting to beat come alive again. Marcus sat on the garden bench beside the koi pond. The light from the paper lanterns floated gently across his face. No longer the face of a boy haunted by illness. He was smiling, not because someone was trying to cheer him up, but because he truly felt joy. Zara sat across from him, her fingers moving in time with a soft jazz melody playing from a nearby speaker. Not a grand performance like those in the square, just a few delicate gestures, enough for Marcus to follow. He raised his hands, slowly drawing through the air, as if dancing in a universe that belonged only to the two of them. This wasn't therapy anymore. It was the start of a new life. "She's not just helping him move," Dr. Williams told James the next day. "He's giving him a reason to want to move." When James heard that, something clutched at his chest. He had spent a fortune on experts, equipment, therapy, trying everything. But the thing that finally helped his son improve was a street girl with nothing more than a dance and deep, aching empathy. But while everyone else was celebrating Marcus's progress, Zara was already moving on to something else. Something bigger, more dangerous, more important than even her own pain. She started reaching out to people who'd been hurt like her. She visited neighborhood after neighborhood, tracked down every young person who had once been rejected by Victoria. She collected their stories, recorded them, photographed them, uncovered forgotten files, and dug up emails from former staff. Piece by piece, Zara began stitching together a picture so clear, so chilling, that it could no longer be ignored. Victoria Whitmore hadn't just crushed her mother's dreams. She had built an entire system, deliberate and calculated, to keep art in the hands of the white elite and push anyone off-brand to the margins. Zara knew evidence alone wasn't enough. She needed a moment, a strike, a stage big enough to make the truth impossible to bury. And that moment was coming. Victoria, meanwhile, remained calm. She thought she'd won. Zara hadn't returned. No one in the press knew what had happened. And the new security systems, dozens of cameras, extra guards, made her feel even more untouchable. What she didn't know was that those very cameras, those office mics, were capturing her every word, every decision, every expulsion order, and all of it was being compiled, encrypted, and archived by a hacker network tied directly to Zara. The charity gala unfolded like a royal celebration for the victorious. Silk gowns, swirling wine glasses, and refined laughter sparkled under chandeliers. Victoria stepped out like a queen, greeting politicians, CEOs, and major donors. People dazzled only by the surface. "Tonight," Victoria declared from the stage, "we receive a historic grant, a testament that when art is properly managed, it can transform society." Applause thundered across the room. But in that exact moment, a man stepped forward, a James Patterson. No one was surprised. He was, after all, the biggest donor of the night. What silenced the entire whole was his voice. "Before we talk about money," he began, "I talk about truth and who deserves to be on this stage." Victoria's posture stiffened, though her smile stayed, until James said Zara's name, the girl who had been humiliated on the academy's doorstep. That smile faded, and when he said the name Sarah Johnson, Zara's mother, once awarded a scholarship and then stripped of it by Victoria for becoming pregnant, the room trembled, but James wasn't done. A massive screen lowered behind him. One by one the files appeared. Letters, emails, scholarship rejections. Vague phrases like image misalignment, incompatible with cultural values, and every one of them targeting Black, Latin, or low-income students without connections. The room erupted into murmurs. Then, silence. A recording played. Victoria's voice echoed, crisp and cold. We need to maintain standards. This center cannot become a social project for people who don't belong. Dead silence. Then an explosion. Sponsors whispering, journalists hitting record, live streams going live. Victoria stumbled, scrambling to defend herself, voice trembling. It's all edited. I've devoted my life to art. That's when Marcus stepped up. He took the mic from his father's hand, his voice small but ringing like a bell at midnight. Zara taught me that dancing doesn't have a skin color. Because of her I can stand. But they kicked her out because she's black. No one moved, not a word. And then Zara walked in. The great doors opened wide. The girl who was once kicked off the sidewalk now entered in an elegant dress, standing tall. Behind her walked 10 other young people, every one of them once turned away by Victoria. Zara's gaze swept across the room. They're not angry, not bitter, but undeniable. You say you've devoted your life to art? Zara asked. No, you used art as a curtain to hide your fear, your exclusion, your refusal to accept what's different. The air inside the hall was thick, as if the entire room had paused its breath, waiting for what would come next. The screen behind Zara shifted, now showing a series of financial documents, living, undeniable proof of what had long been buried beneath layers of prestige and manufactured reputation. Figures, stamps, wire transfers. One after another, they flashed across the screen, each number hitting like a hammer against the flawless facade of Victoria Whitmore. Nearly $500,000, not to scholarships, not to diversity initiatives, but funneled into private accounts through shell companies registered to Victoria's closest allies. All of it verified. Zara, still center stage, lifted her chin. You spent your whole career keeping art away from people like us. And then you stole what little opportunity we had left? James stepped forward, his voice cold, decisive. The voice of a man who'd signed hundreds of real estate deals, now signing the death sentence for a hollow empire. You didn't just discriminate. You stole from the very communities you denied access to. Victoria collapsed into her seat like the air had been sucked from her lungs, her face pale. Stripped of the power that once ruled this entire arts center, the crown, the same donors who once sang her praises, wrote her checks, now stared with disgust. No one spoke, but their eyes screamed everything. Zara stepped closer, stood right where they once shoved her away. 17 years. How many dreams did you destroy? My mother died thinking she wasn't good enough. How many other mothers died carrying that same shame because of the doors you slammed shut? The live stream broadcasted every second. On social media, the hashtag Victoria Whitmore Racist exploded. Over 1 million shares in minutes. Zara looked around the room. I could get revenge. I could use everything you've just seen to make you suffer. But I choose truth, and I choose to give opportunity. James nodded. From this day forward, this place will bear a new name. The Sarah Johnson Institute for Inclusive Arts, named after Zara's mother. A woman denied not for lack of talent, but for daring to be a pregnant black artist. The audience rose to their feet, not out of courtesy, but because for the first time they were standing for what was right. Victoria was escorted out by 2 security guards, the same men who once threw Zara off the steps of this very building. She walked in silence, past eyes that turned away without pity, and the last thing she saw, as she turned one final time, was Zara dancing. But now it was in the light, to the sound of applause, on the very stage that had once shut her out. 6 months later, the world had changed. Zara stood on the main stage of the Sarah Johnson Institute, a space that once welcomed only the elite, now a symbol of artistic justice. In front of her were 50 students, every background, every gender, every walk of life. Some had grown up in shelters, some had been bullied for being immigrants, but now they all moved together in rehearsal. Again, Zara called out, but this time, feel it. Deep, her voice echoed through the auditorium, a space that once echoed with prejudice. In the front row sat Marcus, no longer in a wheelchair. He stood on customized crutches, smiling with fierce pride. His sessions with Zara hadn't just improved his movement, they had burned away the fog that once clouded his spirit. His progress was so profound, leading medical schools began sending researchers to study the effects of art therapy and emotional connection. During break, Marcus called out, "Zara! Dad says you got another invite to guest lecture. Overseas?" Zara smiled. In 6 months, she had gone from a homeless girl to a global icon in the fight against racial bias in the arts. Harvard, Oxford, Sorbonne, all had invited her to teach. The documentary about her, The Dancer Who Changed Everything, was Oscar-nominated, screened in 47 countries. Across the city, Victoria opened another rejection letter. A small local dance school had turned her down for a receptionist role. From the center of high society, she now lived in a one-bedroom rental apartment, her belongings sparse. Everything once bearing her name, wealth, prestige, connections, she had paid back millions in fines and restitution, now surviving on a few $100s at a time. Her once proud family, who used to boast about the Whitmore name, now avoided it like a stain. Friends, colleagues, all vanished without a word. In her final court hearing, the judge declared, "This is not merely a civil matter, but a criminal one. You embezzled public funds meant for inclusion programs, a federal offense aggravated by clear racial bias." Victoria was banned from working in any role involving education or the arts. For the next 10 years, no one spoke her name anymore. Heading across the street, where the afternoon sun struck the tall windows of the Sarah Johnson Institute, James Patterson stood quietly at the window of his new office. From there he watched Zara lead a special class, 30 children with physical and intellectual disability. And yet every movement, every clap of their hands radiated a pure, powerful energy that no words could truly capture. This program, Zara's idea, born from Marcus's miraculous recovery, had already served over 400 children at no cost, with a wait list stretching into neighboring states. What most people didn't see were the countless sleepless nights Zara spent drafting lesson plans, hunting for funding, and training teachers one by one. The office door swung open. Harrison stepped in, his expression a mix of excitement and caution. "Sir," he said, "the Netflix producers are here. They want to talk about a series based on your story." James didn't turn. His gaze stayed on the courtyard below, where Zara knelt beside a blind boy, gently guiding his steps. "Tell them," he said quietly. "The right to tell this story belongs to director Zara. This has always been her journey, not mine. I was just lucky enough to be in the right place to play a small part." On a live CNN broadcast, watched by millions around the world, Zara sat center stage under a soft, glowing light, the face of a 17-year-old girl, fierce, calm, and full of quiet fire. The journalist asked, "How does someone go from being a homeless teen to running one of the most influential cultural institutions in the world?" Zara smiled, not the smile of someone who'd won, but the smile of someone who had walked through darkness and chose to carry the light with her. "I could have responded to prejudice with hate," she said, her voice steady, each word shaped by something long buried and deeply understood. "I could have retaliated with cruelty, with destruction, with violence. But I realized something. The greatest revenge isn't tearing someone down. It's building something so beautiful, so unshakably strong, that it forces them to wonder, what did I miss when I turned my back on this person?" The journalist paused for a beat, then asked the question everyone had waited for, about Victoria Whitmore. "Did you feel satisfaction?" Seeing her fall, Zara let out a slow breath. She shook her head. "He tried to erase me from history," she said. "But in the end, it was history that erased her. I don't feel joy. I feel sadness, because she lived her whole life believing that a person's worth came from status, skin color, or power. But now it's too late for her to learn. Worth can't be bought, and it can't be inherited, and it only comes when you choose to give something good to the world. Next to her, Marcus sat silently, his eyes glowing with something brighter than pride. Now a teenager, he never failed to surprise adults with the depth of his thought. Zara taught me, he said, when someone treats you badly, you have two choices. You can become like them, or become something 1,000 times better. She didn't just choose better, she redefined excellence. The program ended with a montage no one could watch without tears. Hundreds of young faces, black, brown, tan, disabled, poor, now rehearsing under stage lights that once only welcomed the elite. Many had already been accepted into the world's top academies. At Juilliard, the Royal Academy of Music, the Berlin School of Arts, the camera landed on a massive wall inside the Institute's main hall. A black and white portrait of Sarah Johnson, Zara's mother, smiled gently, and beneath it, etched in bold, raised letters, "Talent has no color, no class, only a heart big enough to recognize it." Across town, Victoria Whitmore sat curled in a worn-out chair in a dingy apartment, a half-empty bottle of cheap wine beside her. On the TV screen, Zara's image played again. She didn't change the channel, and for one moment, just one, her eyes softened. Lassie, not out of regret deep enough to make amends, but because, for the first time in her life, she saw clearly what could have been if she had chosen to offer opportunity instead of taking it away. If she had chosen to build bridges instead of walls, but now it was too late. That night in the cozy home James had helped her purchase, Zara sat with Marcus and James, deep in discussion about expanding the Institute to Los Angeles, Chicago, and in conversation she paused. "You know what Victoria's biggest mistake was?" she asked, her gaze distant but sharply focused. James and Marcus answered in unison. "She thought she knew me just by looking at me," Zara said slowly. She never imagined that a homeless black girl with no backing, no power, could have the intellect and the relationships, and most of all, the strength to not only beat her at her own game, but to turn that victory into a beacon of hope for thousands of others like me. Zara's revenge wasn't about forcing Victoria to kneel in public, wasn't about the shame of being exposed at the very heart of power. It was this: she had proven fully irrevocably that talent, dignity, and human worth do not depend on race, background, or the number in your bank account. Zara didn't just flip the script. She transformed the very place that once cast her out into the most powerful symbol of fair art, equal opportunity, and social justice in the Western Hemisphere. A center that once rejected children for being culturally unfit now stood open to the world, a stage without walls. 3 years later, Victoria Whitmore still lived alone in her small rental unit, working part-time at a department store. No one recognized her in the busy crowd. No one said her name anymore. At that very moment, Zara appeared on the cover of Time magazine, named one of the 100 most influential people on the planet. Once a girl kicked off the steps of an academy, she now led an arts network spanning 12 cities, transforming the lives of more than 10,000 young people. Victoria had once tried to erase Zara from history, but in the end, it was Victoria who history erased. Zara never learned to get revenge by hurting the ones who hurt her. She learned something else. The most powerful form of retaliation is turning pain into power. It's to live and give, though brilliantly, that those who once tried to cast you out are forced to face a bitter truth. They were the ones who walked away from history, and when that someone once told you weren't good enough, weren't refined enough, weren't the right fit, become the living proof that limits don't come from where you were born, but from how you rise when the world tries to drown you. That's not just a win, that's legacy. That's history rewritten by your hands. If this story moved you, if you've ever been underestimated, dismissed, or made to feel like the world wasn't built for you, remember this: the most beautiful thing about being human is not where we begin, it's how we keep going, how we rise, how we choose not to become like the ones who tried to silence us. And if you want more stories like this, stories where the best in people do, it only waits for the moment to shine. And stay with us, because the miracle doesn't lie in how a story ends, It lives in how each journey dares to begin again, with hope.